All right, welcome to the Mastering IDX Broker SEO Basics webinar. My name is Alan. With me today is Becky.
Hello.
We're going to be going through a variety of topics today regarding SEO and settings within middleware and some best practices, things that you should be taking advantage of if you aren't already. So let's go ahead and look at what we're going through. So first we're going to look at the basic settings within IDX regarding SEO. Taking credit for your pages, that's going to be a huge key point. We're going to spend a little bit of time there. Dynamic page content, what you can do to leverage that with your site, and avoiding duplicate titles. So let's take a quick look at the first one, taking credit. When we're going to take credit for our site, that means that the various pages with IDX Broker are going to be indexed in a certain way. By default, those pages are going to be indexed at idxbroker.com. So you're going to want to set up your own custom subdomain, and you do this by creating a CNAME record with your name server or hosting provider. So when you set up the CNAME record, you'll notice here we have host. Now this is going to vary from one hosting company to another. So you might enter search, you could enter listings, homes, whatever's going to be relevant to you. I like to think of the entire domain when I'm considering how I'm presenting it to clients. So if you're looking at rentals and you're specifically doing rental properties, you might want to use rentals. That kind of an idea. But that's always going to point to subdomains.idxbroker.com. The TTL that you see here, that's just basically the default. Whatever your hosting provider provides you, don't even worry about that setting. To give you an idea of where you would put that, this is going to be within your account. You're going to go to account, then account info. And on this screen, you're going to see this subdomain domain control. And now, in order to use that, we have to go and set up that record. So let's take a look at what that looks like. My site, I'm using Cloudflare, which is a content delivery network. Your hosting provider is going to have similar settings, but since my name server is controlled with Cloudflare, that's where I'll be. So in here, I'm just going to go and manage my DNS records. We're going to create that CNAME. So I'm going to say CNAME. I'm going to use listings. So we want to make sure that's subdomains.idxbroker.com. And you can see my default is automatic. And one of the things that we get a lot of questions about regarding Cloudflare is what's the best practice? Well, not through the cloud. If you enable this feature, Cloudflare is going to try and cache that and deliver that content from their servers. And you're dealing with dynamic content hosted by IDX Broker. So you want to have that come from IDX Broker servers. So make sure that the cloud's gray, that it's not going through, and then you want to add the record. Something to take note of here as well is that creating this record is going to also varies from host to host. You're going to see different times that record is actually available to everyone on the internet. In the case of Cloudflare, it's almost instant. So by the time I'm done talking about it here, we'll be able to use that in this webinar. Usually this can take anywhere from 24 to 48 hours, depending on hosts. GoDaddy, you can usually get a turnaround of about 30 seconds to a minute. Really varies. So once you have that set, you might want to go and check where that's at. And there's a website you can go to called cachecheck.opendns.com. Here I'm going to just enter in that subdomain that I chose. So listings.mywebsite, and then put in their little code. And we're going to check that. What I should see is just like that, subdomains.idxbroker.com and a bunch of other stuff that's set up for us. So we can tell that this is available across the entire internet now. So let's go ahead and go back to our account and turn that setting on. So we're going to say, yes, I want to use my custom subdomain, and we're going to use listings. Now, as I did that, you should have seen the screen kind of flicker green. If this wasn't set up correctly, let's say I used homes. Homes is not set up correctly. So you always want to kind of refresh this section, revisit it, kind of double check it. But we do know that listings is good. So let's go ahead and set listings. It validated, the CNAME is set up correctly, and even here, it can take up to 48 hours. Always pay attention to the little notifications as you're going through. So we're going to save that. Well, what did that actually do for us? If we take a look at designs and then go to pages, actually I'll just copy the link and we'll put it up here on the screen. So I just copied that link, and Notice it no longer says hmsheather.idxbroker.com. It's using our custom subdomain. What this is going to do for us is, as all of our pages, that includes our search pages, the details pages of every listing in the MLS that we're allowing in our searches, those are going to be indexed and attributed to my domain, no longer idxbroker.com, because we're looking at this being the domain. So we have the top level, here's my domain. Before, when we were seeing it like this, the domain was different. Those are being attributed to idxbroker.com, and that's by default because we don't have access to your DNS records. So that's something you do need to set up for yourself. So once we're using the actual custom subdomain that we specified, that's when things get attributed to our own site. So we can take advantage of all of these links are now going to be on my website as they're indexed. So my page ranking is going to go up. I'm going to see a lot more organic searches when people are looking for listings in my area. They're going to come up on my site more often because of the use of the subdomain.
Let's say you already have an established account, and now they would like to create this custom domain that you're talking about. A good question we have is, will this mess up any links already created?
No. So one of the beautiful things that we do on the IDX Broker side is we're going to see that you're using the default link and automatically redirect with a 301 redirect, so it doesn't affect SEO, and that's going to use your new custom subdomain. So you don't need to update links or anything like that. The domain itself is going to automatically use the new custom subdomain, but as you have time, you can go through and update those links just so that you're not using a 301 on your main site, and just kind of clean up as you go. There's no real rush. It's not going to affect anything. And if anyone's bookmarked that page or you've sent it out in a flyer to someone, hey, check out this listing, it's going to automatically translate that for you. So you're not going to have to worry about errors or any kind of bugs as far as the SEO is concerned. So the next part is the dynamic page content. We want to take a look at what this means exactly. There are a number of settings that we can take advantage of. So when we're talking about dynamic pages, the most dynamic page that you're going to see with IDX Broker is the details page. So let's take a look at those preferences. So underneath designs, pages, if you go down to details, you're going to see details pages. We want to click the edit link in the preferences column. Within the page preferences, we have some SEO settings that are specific to all details pages. Now what that means is you did a search, you got a list of results, you saw a home you liked, and you clicked on it, where that entire property details page, this is the stuff that we want to consider. So when we're looking at the URL, we have a number of options to choose from. By default, you're going to see address, state abbreviation, and zip code. But you may want to add or change how that URL is structured. So we can also add the listing ID, the city name, or the full state name. Now keep in mind, you do want to kind of keep your URLs a little bit short. The shorter the better, but you also need to make them relevant to the content you're showing. So this is a pretty good practice. You're going to get the address of the listing, the state abbreviation, the zip code, and by default, the listing ID is already in the URL, but you could specify it again if you wanted. Now, the dynamic title text, this is something we're going to touch on a little bit more in the next section, but these titles for the details page are going to overwrite what you have set in your wrapper, and you want to make these as relevant to the content you're showing as possible. This is going to help you with your page ranking. So when we're looking at the page ranking itself, the listing ID doesn't really say a lot about the page as far as that title. I may want to say something completely different here. I may want to say, let's take a look at maybe the property type. So this could be like single family residential listing, for sale in, let's add the city. How about that? Now we can include the listing ID in the description, and everything's starting to kind of relate a little bit. One of the other things to really take advantage of is we can actually put the listing remarks in that property description. And this is going to be used within that OG tag. It's also going to be used in the meta tags for the description. So as those pages are indexed, that little snippet that you see when you search on Google for various things that kind of gives you what that page is relevant about is taken from that description tag. So the more information you have in there that's relevant to the URL, that's in your text, for your title, all of that's going to kind of come together right at the end, and that's going to be within these descriptions. So I like to recommend using the listing remarks, listing description, and that's going to come up as remarks concat. So let's format that a little bit, put a little hyphen between them. Now keywords, they're not as relevant to SEO as they once were. It used to be you would specify really static keywords that were relevant, but when we're talking about dynamic content like this, there's only going to be a few keywords that are going to even have any relevance. And those things are going to be like the city, the state, address, the listing ID, zip code, anything beyond that, you're kind of going a little bit too far, and your keywords aren't going to be as relevant. And now that weighting metric that we're seeing is keywords in relevance to the description, in relevance to the URL, and what's on the page. Those keywords are going to be better weighed than just putting in random keywords that you think are going to kind of generally cover everything. And what's great about the details page with these dynamic settings is I can actually change those keywords on every single listing based on that listing's information. So like I said, let's focus on that address, the state abbreviation, zip code, because that's going to change with each one, maybe the property type. As long as it's dynamic and it references the listing. So right now we're just talking generically about all listings. So any listing that Google is going to index on my site, I want my keywords in this section to be as weighted as possible, kind of generically across the board. So you're not going to see, and that's a good question.
I would say a good time to put Central Florida in that section
links
would be, is for the saved links that you're creating, or actually if your niche market is Central Florida, if that is the only area that you serve, that would best fit you.
Yeah, and so when we're talking about saved links and SEO there, that's kind of a separate section that we'll get into next. And that's when you're creating those neighborhood searches, your landing pages, your actual niche market. That's a good point. You want to take those keywords and make it apply to what's on that page. So if I'm showing Central Florida homes in this particular subdivision within this price range, that's the kind of stuff I want to see keywords. I want to see that in my description. I want that in my title, and that's where you would want to make those adjustments.
Yeah, so I guess the best way to put it would be when you're editing the SEO settings to the details page, do not get down to the nitty-gritty. Be rather broad, but with the saved links, that's when you want to get down to the hyper-local area, neighborhood, what that specific link is pertaining to.
So within the details, and we'll get to the saved links next. So right now, let's just look at the property type, because that's going to be universal. Depending on your MLS, you might have some property subtypes you want to kind of bring in, because that could be a little bit more specific. And then we'll do city, state, state abbreviation, because that's how people are going to search, the zip code, possibly even the county. And this is going to be brought up for each one of those listings. And this is kind of a general kind of guideline. You'll probably find as you're doing your own marketing and watching trends within your Google Analytics account, you're probably going to come in and make some adjustments to this, because it all depends on how people are using your site, how they're searching for stuff, and how you're growing in that area. SEO is not do this and this is going to happen kind of thing. You play with it, you make some modifications, you tweak it a little bit here and there, and you get to boost that in various areas as you go. So we'll save these changes. And now we'll take a look at those saved links, and then we'll show some examples of how these settings are taking place. So for saved links, that's under Preferences, Saved Links, Manage, or if you're creating a new one, that's where you would want to go. So let's go ahead and edit an existing saved link and take a look at those settings. Again, this will fall under that Preferences category. So if you click on Preferences, here's our SEO. Now notice the link URL. We want that to be relevant to what we're trying to show. So in this case, I just have an example, but we can change that. We could say,
just to be specific.
sure. All right, so now we need to update our link URL, and I recommend using the title because then those two are going to match. All right, and so now in our meta tags description, this is where we want to take that kind of creative flair and talk about those results that we're going to share. So we could say amazing pool properties for sale in Boca Raton, and you could put your listing association, your brokerage information, kind of expand on that a little bit within, I don't know, let's see, like 200,000 to 300,000 listed within the last 7 days. So when they search for listings in there and you've got a description like that, you're going to be kind of leveraging the results you're showing as well as making this description kind of work for you. And that's where these keywords are going to make that difference too. So you could say Boca Raton, Florida, FL, and real estate,
pool, properties. I mean, you can get to the nitty-gritty.
This is where you would want to get as granular as possible. You're trying to make it as relevant to the search results that you're showing back. And another thing, if you're wanting to showcase those links and start to see some indexing on there, if you wanted to have one place that showed all of that, that's where this links showcase comes in. So this is where I might say Boca Raton pool properties. And I'm just going to copy my description from there here. These little settings we're showing here, this is where you're going to want to make those adjustments as you go, kind of weigh those metrics out. So if we save this.
One question.
Sure.
Do you have to select yes, use meta tag keywords?
Yes. So if you don't, it's not going to toggle that over. So it wouldn't have applied any keywords. It would have just used the generic keywords from my wrapper. All right, so once we have our generic kind of settings down, because it's something we'll come back and visit as our marketing and as things go, we'll make adjustments. Now, let's see what that actually looks like on that front end page. Where can I actually see that? Well, you're not going to actually see that on the front page. Remember, we set that title, and up here in our browser, we can see the title. So now we kind of see what's going on there. Now we don't have the search results set up in here to actually return the results, but right now we're more focused on the SEO. But what about everything else I entered? Why isn't that showing on the page? Because SEO settings are built for robots to consume. Various web crawlers out there are going to visit this link. They don't really care about what the human sees so much. Some of them do. Googlebot can be a little bit picky. But if we switch over and look at the source of this page, that's when we're going to start to see our settings, the stuff that we entered. So here's our title, here's our description, we've got that set up here, and here's the keywords that we set. So all of this is relevant, and it's going to show up at the very top, and it's going to be the first thing that the robot is going to see as it goes through and reads this information. Now, like I had mentioned before, there were those other pages. So let's take a look at one of those. So the other thing we wanted to take a look at were the page titles and those preferences, and we'll get into that next, but let's take a look at just a generic details page just so we can kind of get a feel of what those settings did for us. So you can see our title up here. It's too long to actually fit within that tab, but we can view that page source too and get a sense of what's going on. So here we are, single family for sale in Miami Beach. Our description, here's our listing ID, and here are the remarks for the listing, which it's going to be the full listing remarks, which we'll see down here. All of that is in my listing description. So this comes in handy when we're talking about getting relevant content into that description so it can be indexed correctly. So now we've got all of this wonderful stuff right in the code that the robot is going to read. And on top of that, you'll notice these OG tags. So now when I share this listing on Facebook or any other social media, it's looking for these tags specifically to kind of format that shared listing. So now the listing description is going to show up there, the title is going to show up on there, as well as the first image, things like that. So it's really important to kind of adjust those and polish up those details pages to get the best SEO benefit that you can. Talk a little bit about sitemaps. Within IDX Broker, you have two kinds of sitemaps. You have the generic HTML sitemap, which is kind of intended for you to present to your average viewer. And then there's an XML sitemap. Now that one is what's intended to be submitted to Google, to Webmaster Tools, to various other search engine indexing services. This is the link that you want to provide those systems. The generic one, if we wanted to take a look at the sitemap, it's just going to be basically a list of links. And in addition to that, remember that setting I talked about with the save link, that link showcase? That's similar to an HTML or web page sitemap that you can provide to your visitors. So if we take a look at that link showcase, here it is. Boca Raton pool properties, amazing properties for sale. So everything that we entered into that save link shows up on this smaller sitemap. And if we look at the actual sitemap, I'm just going to bounce around real quick since we're just talking about sitemaps. This is the generic sitemap that you can provide just a general web user, just someone who's looking on your site wanting to know, hey, where can I find this kind of stuff? So now you can say real estate for sale by city. These are all pre-bucketed out by IDX Broker. They're just kind of part of the entire system for you. So if we wanted to come down and say, well, how about Indian River? I click on that. It's going to set up that search for me and return the 4 results that are in there at the moment. So, and again, we're just showing some demo content, but that's going to change based on your MLS, and it's meant for your users to kind of take advantage of if you want to offer that. Now, there's some additional settings to take advantage of here. If you are restricting what cities that you're providing in your searches and things like that, that's where the preferences for that page come into play. So under global preferences, we want to go to other and make sure that if we have any kind of custom city list or county or zip code, that is applied here. And you can also change to show the full state name on the sitemap. So some settings to take advantage of. And that search by city page, that's just like another sitemap as well. It's going to give you each city with price breakdowns and etc. So those are offerings that you can use, but those kind of front-end sitemaps, those are not supposed to be submitted to search engines. Google's looking for an XML, and most of them are looking for an XML-based sitemap. So if you want to take advantage of that hyper-local, I only work in these handful of cities or in this specific county, you want to set up those lists and get them applied. And that'll be a topic for a future webinar. That brings us to the topic I brought up earlier, and that's avoiding duplicate titles. Search engines like Google are going to ding you every time they see a duplicate title. And you're going to run into that if you're using a wrapper, because you're going to create a global wrapper, apply it to all the pages that you can, and that's the title that's going to be used unless you change it. Now that dynamic details page isn't going to do this, but other pages in IDX Broker also need a little bit of polish. So if we go to designs and then pages, let's take a look at the address search. Now we know what that search does, but unfortunately, unless I come in here and set some preferences, that page title is going to use the wrapper because it's blank. It's also not going to use any description or keywords that I might want to use to kind of talk about that address search page. So this is another location where I would take the time, go in there, make those changes. And I mean, it could be just as simple as saying address search for the MLS that you're a member of. So we could say Florida Naples, just as an example. And then we could set up those descriptions and keywords, much like we did for saved link or the details page. Now, the difference here is we don't have any dynamic tags to use because this page is pretty much static. It's always going to be the address search form. It's always going to have certain information on it. And that's the kind of stuff that you want to target when you're setting up these tags. So I know it's an address search. I could say search for homes by address, enter in the address you're looking for, and kind of provide some instructions in that description, because someone's searching around and they want to look for that information and that little snippet comes up in Google or Bing or Yahoo. You've already provided them a little bit of instruction. And the same thing you could actually add to a subheader just so that the content is relevant between your description, the functionality of the page, and the description here. And those options are available for the majority of the pages. So you've got page preferences for everything from search pages, results. You'll see that more info and schedule showing don't. However, these are kind of forms and they're going to be pulled up from a details page. So some of the information there is going to be relevant and it's going to switch for you. The XML sitemap doesn't have these settings, and that's because that file, which we can take a look at, it's not very pretty, is meant for robots. That leads me back to why some of those sitemaps are meant for my visitors, and this one is meant for robots. This isn't something I want to share with my average visitor to my site. However, this is the kind of stuff that Google and other search engines like to read because it tells them, where should I be looking for all of these listings that you want attributed to your website? And you'll see listings dot is carrying over again. So even within my sitemap, I'm getting the credit for those links. And we have some additional resources in our knowledge base to help you with verifying that subdomain with Google, things like that. That's for a more advanced session of SEO. Thank you for showing up, and thanks for listening to me blather on about SEO and settings and stuff. We look forward to helping you guys out and getting the indexing credits you guys are looking for, and we know how important it is. So don't hesitate to reach out if you run into any kind of difficulties or snags.